Why do developing nations often ally themselves with one or the other superpowers? So after World War II, these countries who had gained their independence from their former European imperialists, they're going to be influenced one way or the other. And you've got three types of worlds basically. That's how or historians kind of talk about it. You have first world nations, which include Europe, right here, Western Europe, including Greece and Turkey, the Scandinavian countries, America, Canada, and Australia. You got Second World, which is all the communist countries, Eastern Europe, Russia, China, Vietnam, part of Korea, and Cuba. And the third world were all these countries in green. And so you're trying to influence. So the superpower nations of the U.S. is trying to influence the green nations, and the Soviet Union is trying to influence the green nations. And so these third world countries did not necessarily belong to one side or the other, but they're willing to be influenced, especially if you can have something good to give them. So the U.S., the USSR, and China to a lesser degree are often using techniques to gain influence in the third world. They sponsor wars and revolution. The CIA and KGB have covert actions in various countries, including assassinations. So the U.S. also sends aid in schools and voluntary workers. The USSR will provide military aid, and they'll also provide aid in schools and voluntary workers, and vice versa. So both sides are kind of involved in this war. And remember, the U.S. does not want to attack the Soviet Union, and the Soviet Union doesn't want to attack the U.S. So these non-aligned nations, some nations say, you know, we're going to stay out of the whole thing. India and Indonesia, they stay neutral. That'll be on your quiz. And so these African and Asian nations become the third world. And you want to have influence, and you don't want the Soviet Union to have influence. So what's going on with that is all these various countries are fighting for influence. So one of the places they most famously fight during the Cold War is in Cuba. The U.S. had supported Fulgencio Batista, a Cuban leader, and he was overthrown by Castro. Castro, this is him right here, he just recently died. He suspended elections, he jailed or killed opponents, and he became a harsh dictator. Took over the economy, kicked out U.S.-owned factories in Cuba. Eisenhower in the 50s orders a trade embargo, and so Castro goes, you know what, even though I'm 90 miles from U.S., I'm going to become a client state of the Soviet Union. So the Soviet Union says, sure, we'll give you support as long as you let us put nuclear missiles in there. So the USSR sees weakness in the U.S. and Latin America. The leader of the Soviet Union, Khrushchev, builds secret military sites in Cuba. The U.S. spy plane, here's a picture of one, spots this. JFK, who's now the president, took over after Eisenhower demands the missiles be removed. JFK orders a naval blockade of Cuba, preventing USSR from installing more missiles. And you nearly have a war. At the very last second, Khrushchev ordered the ships to come back. So these countries are all fighting for something. They've also fight in Nicaragua. There's a 10-year war in Nicaragua. You have the Sandinistas and Ortega. He'll also be on your quiz. And the U.S. began aiding or supporting anti-communist Nicaraguan rebels called Contras. And finally, in 1990, Nicaragua holds free elections. But one of the most famous places that was in the news recently because of the movie Argo was Iran. Iran was led by this guy, the Shah Pahlavi. He was very pro-Western. And angry Iranian nationalists resented his pro-Western stances, and they tried to kick the Shah out. So the U.S. feared that Mossadegh would turn to USSR for support, so they had him arrested and the Shah placed back in power. And then in 1979, which is the basis of the movie Argo, this guy, the Ayatollah Khomeini, leads a revolution. And he returns and he creates the Islamic Republic of Iran. And they actually hold people hostage in the American embassy for over a year. So Iran, even though it was supported by the U.S., that ends up actually having a very, very hardline religious revolution. So Afghanistan also is a very important country for us today because we're still involved in a war there. And this is often known as the Soviet version of Vietnam. In 1979, you have Afghan rebels threatening to topple the communist regime. The USSR sent troops, and they were really supporting communism there. And they could not get rid of the rebels who had U.S. weapons. And the U.S. aided the rebels because they feared the Soviet invasion was a threat to the rich Middle East oil supply. In the 80s, in the late 80s, the Soviet Union pulls out, and America pulls out, and Afghanistan is severely weakened. And actually, communism collapses as part of because of the Afghanistan war. It really collapses in the Soviet Union, and we pull out, and then a new group moves in called the Taliban, and they actually give harbor to Osama bin Laden. So there's a lot of unintended consequences because of the Cold War.